The tale unfolds with the sight of a masked man beset by a horde of monsters. He vanquishes them in an instant, but declares it insufficient, yearning for more. The scene shifts to a man fleeing in a carriage from goblins, only to be saved by a band of warriors who defeat the creatures. Victorious, they journey back to town, passing by a famished sentinel standing guard at the castle. He watches them, despondent, lamenting his fate tied to his useless skill of gluttony, which leaves him perpetually hungry. The townsfolk gaze in awe as the trio of Vlerick siblings, holy knights, parade through. Yet, their nobility is a facade, revealed when one cruelly kicks a peasant aside. Approaching the castle, the eldest, Raphael, throws his disdain upon the sentinel by discarding his pain on the ground. As the sentinel reaches to retrieve it, Hatto steps on his hand and his stomach growls, prompting Raphael to scorn him as disgusting. The siblings get mad at the growling, thinking it makes it seem like they don't pay him enough. They start beating him up, but he is saved by another holy knight named Roxy, who reminds the siblings of their duty as holy knights to be kind to the citizens they have sworn to protect. The siblings decide to leave, and Roxy helps Fate up. She consoles him by telling him that guarding the gate is honorable, and they are both equal in their job. Roxy takes over guarding the gate and asks him to tell her if something like this happens again, but Fate says that he is used to it, and he decides to leave. We learn that Fate wants to protect Roxy by keeping a distance, and he doesn't want to get her involved as he fears that Raphael will hurt her too. Fate is encouraged by the bartender to stand up for himself, or he could end up dead like the last guy. On his way home, Fate curses his gluttony skill for still being hungry even though he had a meal. He wishes he could have been born with a more useful skill, and despairs that he can't do anything else because he can't change how things are. Fate spies thieves scaling the castle wall and rushes to alert Roxy of the peril. She leaves him to guard her post as she dashes off to confront the intruders. As he anxiously awaits Roxy's return, one thief charges toward him. Though his instincts urge him to flee, the trust Roxy has placed in him bolsters his resolve to stand firm. Bracing for battle, he sees the thief is already wounded. Summoning his courage, Fate leaps forward, piercing the thief's chest. Suddenly, a voice declares that his gluttony skill has been activated, boosting his stats. Bewildered, Fate listens as the voice reveals he now possesses the skills of identification and telepathy. At the same time, Roxy returns from her fight and is concerned for him, but he notices something strange because he heard words coming from her, but her mouth didn't move. He reassures her and tells her that she can take credit for his kill because it would cause problems for him if Raphael found out, so in return, Roxy offers him a job to work for her family. Fate considers his options and eventually agrees to work for her family. Later that night, Fate notices that all his stats are in the triple digits, and he then realizes that he must have been using telepathy on Roxy earlier. He is still confused about what is going on, but is now confident he can defeat monsters with his improved stats. The following day, Fate goes out to look for a sword, but when the merchant finds out he is poor, he tells him he can only afford the trash swords in the barrel. He looks through the swords using his new Identify skill and learns that all the swords are useless except one. When Fate gazes upon the sword, he is astounded when it suddenly speaks, introducing itself as Greed and urging Fate to claim it. Discovering Greed's knowledge of gluttony, Fate resolves to acquire it. Meanwhile, the Vlerick siblings discuss Roxy's attempt to employ Fate without their consent, but Raphael dismisses the need for conflict with the Hart's family, as they are among the 5 great houses supporting the kingdom. Deeming Fate insignificant, Raphael then heads to the military district, revealing to his sister his quest for immortality. Later, as Fate walks with Greed, the sword warns of an imminent threat. A goblin appears, but Fate swiftly slays it, activating his gluttony skill and enhancing his stats. More goblins swarm, but Fate remains unperturbed, cutting them down effortlessly. After each kill, his gluttony skill is activated, and he ends up killing hundreds. When it's all over, he checks his stats and is surprised by how much they have increased. Greed points out that Fate must be full, and Fate notices that his stomach hasn't growled at all that day, which has never happened before. Greed says that normally each person has only the skill they are born with, but thanks to gluttony, Fate can steal the stats and skills of others, but it's not something that other people can know about. Fate realizes that he must always fight alone, but Greed reassures him, saying he is not alone since he is with him. Fate takes all the goblin ears to get paid, and wonders about all the things he can buy as they enter the town, but is reminded by Greed of his maintenance coming first. In that fateful moment, they chance upon a man and a young girl pleading for aid. Fate, using his skill of discernment, gauges the man's threat level and discovers his ability to conceal stats. Although suspicious, Fate insists they cannot ignore the girl's cry for help. They follow the man, who reveals the girl will be sold as a slave to the Holy Knights. Greed cautions that the man is formidable, urging retreat, but Fate, having finally obtained the power he long desired, vows to protect the weak. An old nun recounts to orphans the tale of Holy Laplace, the world's creator, who bequeathed special powers, known as skills, upon her departure. She reminisces about the era of peace before these skills existed. Suddenly, another nun bursts in, frantic over a missing orphan named Sahara. As the search continues, it is unveiled that Sahara has been abducted. Seizing the moment, Fate rescues her, only to find the kidnapper lurking behind. The kidnapper calls him foolish, telling him that he has no chance of beating him. He wants to take the girl to safety, but is unsure of what to do. Greed advises him to step back, take advantage of the kidnapper's overconfidence, and wait for the right moment to attack. He tries to flee with Sahara, but they eventually reach a dead end. Fate launches a surprise attack, and as the man prepares to use his skill, Greed instructs Fate to strike him head-on. Fate charges at the man, delivering a decisive blow. Fate orders the man to tell him everything, but he refuses, so Fate proceeds to torture him, and he eventually tells Fate that he was ordered by Hado to kidnap Sahara. Fate takes Sahara to get some food after hearing her stomach growl, and he takes her back to the orphanage. He is surprised to hear Sahara's gratitude because it's the first time someone thanked him. He approaches Sahara and gives her advice, the same words his father had told him in the past, but he had been unable to understand them up until now. No matter how hard things get, if you can laugh them off, one day you will find happiness. As they journeyed back, Greed lauded Fate for mastering his first martial skill, the one-handed sword technique. This arcane art enables him to strike twice in a single blow. Fate, however, attributed his victory over the kidnapper to sheer luck and resolved to grow stronger, aiming to triumph through skill alone. The next day, Fate arrived at the Hart family estate. Roxy greeted him at the gate, her appearance stunning him. She led him to her father's grave, disclosing that he had been slain 5 days prior in Gallia, a continent teeming with monsters, where holy knights are tasked with maintaining order. This year, the Hart family bore that burden, but a divine dragon, emerging from 1,000-year seclusion, decimated the group led by her father. Now, the head of the house, Roxy expressed her eagerness to collaborate with him. As they are about to shake hands, Fate remembers that his telepathy will be activated, so he points towards a random person. We meet the chief maid Haru, who reminds Fate to conduct himself as a servant of the Hart family. A week goes by as Fate continues to work in the Hart estate. He's talking with the other servants when his stomach starts to growl, shocking the other servants because they just ate lunch. He is called to meet Roxy, but his stomach continues to growl, and even Fate is confused by what is happening. Roxy tries to have a conversation with him, but he keeps thinking about why he's so hungry. Roxy snaps him out of it, and the two relate over their dead fathers because they were both killed by monsters. She considers him as a member of the family, causing him to become flustered. But he suddenly loses consciousness. He wakes up in his room, where he sees a note from Roxy, telling him to take the day off. Fate, driven by curiosity, inquires about Greed's insatiable hunger. Greed unveils the truth. It stems from gluttony. The more souls Fate devours, the mightier he will grow, but simultaneously, his craving will intensify, compelling him to hunt souls relentlessly until his demise. Greed warns Fate that his eyes will betray him when his hunger peaks, and Fate notices his eyes glowing red. Venturing outside, Fate strolls past a crowd, their scent tantalizing. Greed elucidates that his hunger surge has activated, a temporary boon aiding in his hunt, with prey detectable by scent. Weak prey rendered immobile by terror. Together, they exit the kingdom and confront a horde of petrified goblins. Fate annihilates them and marches into the hobgoblin forest. His slaughter persists for hours, quenching his hunger at last. Suddenly, a goblin king emerges, and Fate employs his identify skill. We see that they're both almost equal in terms of stats, but the goblin king has a health regeneration skill. Fate goes after the goblin king, and is disgusted to see the goblin devour a human. He launches a surprise attack, slicing off its arm, and the fight goes on, but all he can do is dodge its attacks. Greed tells him to attack, so he charges in, managing to overpower it, and he lands the finishing blow. Fate's stats increase significantly, and he gains the health regeneration skill. Greed reveals that with Fate's current stats, he can unlock Greed's first level in exchange for his stats. Greed explains that the first level will give him new functions, but Fate is shocked to learn that he needs to hand over all the stats he gained since they met. Greed reveals that Fate will lose the right to wield him if he doesn't unlock him, so Fate agrees to do it. He begins the process, and Fate can feel his power leading his body, as Greed transforms into a magic bow. He tells Fate that there is a goblin watching them, and he teaches Fate how to use the bow, which creates magic arrows when the string is pulled, telling him that he can aim wherever he wants, but the arrow will always hit its target. Fate takes the Goblin King's ears, and he leaves it at the orphanage door, as he believes that they need it more. The following day, Fate intercepts an intruder, only to discover it's Roxy disguised as a peasant, intent on a covert inspection of the town. She insists Fate accompany her, and, during their journey, requests to see his sword. Anxious, she might uncover its secret. Fate hesitates, but the sword slips from his grasp. Roxy catches it without noticing anything amiss and remarks that it requires maintenance, offering to take him to the Hart family's blacksmith. Upon reaching the town, they pause at a stall. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts as a holy knight approaches. At the worst moment, Fate's stomach growls, inciting the knight's ire. The knight moves to trample him, but Roxy intervenes, drawing the crowd's attention. Suspicious eyes try to discern if the peasant girl is indeed Miss Roxy. Greed suggests that if they pretend to be a couple, no one will suspect Roxy's true identity. Overhearing Greed's plan, Roxy agrees, and they convincingly act as a couple, dispelling doubts about her identity. While everyone is distracted, they both slip away, and they hide in the corner. Fate hears her thoughts, as she thinks about how her heart is racing, because this is the first time she has locked arms with a boy. Roxy decides that they need to keep moving, and they overhear people talking about all the dead goblins that were recently found. The rumors are that it was done by a wandering monster, but it doesn't explain why the gobliniers were donated to the orphanage in the slums. She asks Fate to take her where the warriors gather, saying she wants to investigate the wandering monster. Fate takes Roxy to the bar, where the bartender reveals that he has heard about a warrior who struck gold when he found a mountain of goblin corpses with their ears still intact. Roxy surmised that it must have been a beast from distant lands, while the barkeep lamented that such news would sour business, as many merchants traversed those goblin plains. Fear of monstrous attacks would surely deter their passage. Just then, an old man entered the tavern and joined their discourse, proclaiming that the creature was a lich, thus explaining why the Holy Knights were taking direct action. A band of warriors then barged in, inviting Roxy to join their revelry. With a gentle push, Roxy sent one crashing across the room, revealing strength only a Holy Knight could wield. With her identity uncovered, the warriors hastily offered all their coins in apology, but she refused, urging them not to fear the Holy Knights. She shared her dream of a world where commoners and Holy Knights could share in laughter. They then visited the blacksmith, who had completed the maintenance on Greed, leaving it looking like a brand new sword. While going through town, Roxy explains that she didn't know about the hunt because it's being led by the Vlarik family, and they simply didn't tell her. We see Hato holding a child, explaining that he is simply taking a lost child into protection, but fate takes the boy away, and Roxy tells them that they will take care of him. Roxy asks Raphael why she was not informed about the hunt, and he says that he didn't want to bother her, as she must have been busy mourning her father. The Vleriks decide to leave, while Fate and Roxy take the boy to find his mother, allowing him to reunite with her. After returning home, Fate asks Greed for a way to hunt monsters without Roxy finding out, and the next day, Greed tells him to buy a mask with perception warping magic, which will make him look different to whoever sees him. We see that Raphael has gathered the knights in a dark room, and they discuss the excursion to Gallia. In time, a band of warriors discovered more slain goblins and, looking up, beheld a lich atop a mound of corpses. Terrified, they dubbed it the corpses and fled, while Fate savored his grim moniker. The next day, Roxy approached Fate, instructing him to accompany her on a secret mission. They boarded a carriage, passing through the Hart family's vineyard until they arrived at their destination, where Roxy's mother, Aisha, awaited them at the door. Introducing Fate as her newly hired servant, Aisha inquired if he liked Roxy, flustering both. Aisha clarified, seeking his view of Roxy as a superior. Fate professed his desire to serve her loyally for life, leaving Roxy astonished. Fate was later seen aiding the other servants in harvesting grapes, learning how the lords had personally nurtured the land for generations, instilling pride in all who served them. A servant reveals that it's time for hunting as well, because monsters called kobold appear during the harvest season, looking for food. Fate's stomach starts growling, as Greed explains that gluttony requires various kinds of souls, and goblins alone won't satisfy his growing hunger. On his way home, Fate sees a mysterious girl with a massive axe. As she passes by, Fate is shocked to see she has the same eyes as him. He tries to check her stats, but it doesn't work. The girl checks him out and mentions she is too early. Fate wonders what she's talking about, but she just tells him that he can have the kobolds and declares that he now owes her, telling him that they will meet again. Roxy catches up, and she points out that the girl is a Gallian. We learned that Gallia was a great military power 1,000 years ago, but with the rise in monsters, their nation eventually collapsed, and most of their people were killed. So she is surprised to see a survivor. As the two head back, Fate wonders if Roxy will really be okay hunting the monsters on her own, but she assures him that the other warriors will be with her, and it's her duty as a holy knight. The following day, the villagers hid, preparing to hunt kobolds, only to be shocked by the sudden appearance of a massive monster. Fate's mouth watered at the sight, but Greed sensed trouble, knowing Fate was nearly in a starvation state. Fate worried about Roxy seeing him in such a condition. He checked the beast stats and found it to be a level 50 creature with extraordinarily high attributes. Known as a crowned beast, Greed explained it was born from accumulated aggression. Returning to the village, panic ensued as they doubted their chances, but Roxy calmed them, vowing to slay the beast and ordering the warriors to prepare for the next day's hunt. Greed noted their slim odds, prompting Fate to secretly return alone that night, determined to protect Roxy. He discovered kobolds surrounding the crowned beast, and Greed questioned his plan. Transforming his weapon to bow form, Fate began picking off kobolds, absorbing their stats through his gluttony. He attempted to shoot the crowned beast, but it deflected the arrow using one of its soldiers. Fate gets closer with his sword, taking out even more of the kobolds. We see his stats have significantly increased, and he thinks he can now take out the boss with his bow, but the beast is able to catch his arrow. He prepares to fight it with his sword, but the beast suddenly uses a skill that blasts him with a shockwave. Fate is knocked out, and a kobold comes to finish him off. However, it suddenly gets cut, and we see Fate was just pretending to be unconscious. Fate takes out another kobold, absorbing its stats, and Greed notes that he should be able to use his first level hidden art. It will cost 10% of his current stats, but it should allow him to defeat the boss. Fate accepts the conditions, and his bow gets an upgrade. He fires a powerful shot at the beast, wiping it out in a single hit, and Fate thinks it might have been overkill. His gluttony skill is activated, but it causes him tremendous pain. He wonders what's going on, and greed tells him it's because it's the first time he has devoured a soul of higher quality. But greed tells him he must bear the pain no matter what, or else he will lose control, and it will be even worse than his starvation state. Fate tries to hold it in, but the pain is unbearable, and he screams in agony. The following dawn, the warriors beheld the aftermath of the carnage and pondered if it was wrought by enchanted arrows. Roxy stood among them, questioning who possessed the might to unleash such devastation. Moments later, Fate appeared unharmed, and Roxy recounted to Aisha what she had witnessed. She recalled the enigmatic girl they had glimpsed the previous day, suspecting her to be the one who had vanquished the monsters. Roxy informed Fate of her intent to return to the capital, and Aisha noticed the joy in Roxy's demeanor when she spoke to him. Eventually, Aisha urged him to always support and care for Roxy. She told him that prestige and authority were inconsequential. What truly mattered was his desire to aid Roxy. With little time left, Aisha beseeched Fate to look after Roxy in her stead and to ponder her words carefully. As they journeyed home, Fate reflected on Aisha's counsel, feeling unworthy of the duty, burdened by the secret he kept from Roxy. That evening, Fate is shocked to see that his eyes are still red, even though he has slaughtered a bunch of goblins. Greed explains that the goblins won't be able to satisfy his hunger anymore, and he must find stronger souls before he loses control. Sometime later, Fate is sitting in a bar and decides that he is not worthy of standing by Roxy because he is hiding things from her. The old man walks in and complains about how Hado is joining the Lich Hunt. He clearly hates Hado and wishes that he is sent on the galley expedition so that he can end up as monster food. This shocks Fate because he can't believe that they are planning another expedition so soon, considering that Roxy's father just passed away, and we see that Roxy has been chosen as Hado's replacement. A few moments later, we see Roxy at her father's grave, telling him that she has been chosen for the galley expedition. Fate arrives, imploring her not to go, but Roxy tells him that she has already decided that she will go. Meanwhile, the Vleriks rejoiced, anticipating their chance to be rid of Roxy. The two other siblings entrusted matters to Hado as they departed for a place called Tenburn. Hado demanded that Raphael reveal the secret of immortality, but Raphael insisted he must first deal with the Lich. Fate stood amidst the plains, grappling with the realization that he couldn't meddle in official affairs. Yet, he resolved not to let the Holy Knights treat people like refuse. Hado arrived with his men, ordering an attack on Fate, who swiftly dispatched them as Hado watched in horror. The others fled in terror, and Hado prepared to confront Fate, vowing not to let a corpse make a fool of him. Fate removed his mask, unveiling his identity, leaving Hado baffled at how someone of no renown could wield such power. Hado, proud of his status as a holy knight, accepted Fate's challenge to demonstrate his strength. Fate inquired of Greed whether a holy sword could be shattered, and Greed assured him it was possible, urging Fate to strike with all his might. Hado tries to attack with holy light, but Fate suddenly appears behind him. He takes a swing, but Fate destroys the holy sword, and he challenges Hado to take the broken half. Hado tries to step back, but he falls to the ground, and Fate picks him up, saying he needs to be taught a lesson. Fate smashes him against the trees, destroying multiple trees, and he starts begging for his life. But Fate throws him high into the air, and he equips the upgraded bow, firing a powerful arrow towards Hado and leaving a hole in the clouds. Hado falls to the ground, and he wonders why Fate didn't kill him. Fate says that he still has questions for him, and Hado thinks that this is about Roxy, so he reveals that she volunteered for the Goliath expedition herself, begging Fate to spare him as he promises to cancel the expedition. Fate explains that this isn't for Roxy, but for his own revenge, and he delivers the finishing blow. The gluttony skill activates again, giving Fate the holy sword technique, which is required for a person to become a holy knight. Greed tells Fate he now holds the title of a holy knight, though the capital's denizens would never accept such a claim, and Fate himself harbors no desire for the title. Greed offers him the opportunity to unlock the second level, requiring the sacrifice of all his stats. Fate consents, and Greed initiates the upgrade, unveiling a new form, a scythe capable of slicing through anything. The following day, Roxy prepares to depart on her expedition, with everyone gathered to bid her farewell. Despite the somber mood, Roxy reassures them that 3 years will pass quickly. She approaches Fate, and they exchange goodbyes. Haru presents Fate with a recommendation letter from Roxy for employment at a lord's manor, but Fate declines, declaring he will live henceforth as a warrior. That night, we learn that Fate actually plans to go to Gallia to support Roxy. As Fate is leaving the capital, we see a girl watching him, saying things are shaping up nicely. Sometime later, Roxy gives a speech to all the troops in the expedition, telling everyone that they must do their best to destroy the divine dragon, which has woken up from its slumber. Roxy is glad to see that a girl named Mia and a man named Mugen will be joining her. Mia calls Mugen an oddball for wanting to test his strength against a divine dragon, but Mugen explains that he volunteered because of Roxy's father and wants to avenge him. Roxy asks him if his family is against him going to Gallia, but he says that his daughter couldn't care less and only wants him to bring back Gallian relics. We see that Mugen's daughter, Rain, is working as a researcher in a lab filled with the goblins that Fate killed. She discovers that some of the wounds were from the magic arrows of the Black Sword, one of the weapons of mortal sin. We learn that the weapons of mortal sin are made of a special material, which can manipulate magic power at a high level, and Rain thinks that they can expand the possibility spectrum for skills, saying she wants to see one of these weapons. Fate brings him to the bustling trading city of Tetra, revealing that he has walked these streets before. Discovering that the bus to Gallia would not depart until the next day, he decided to gather information. In a bar, he witnesses a man begging for help from a group of warriors, but is rejected and bullied for not paying enough money. He intervenes, chases away the thugs, and welcomes the man who turns out to be Set, an old friend of his. In a flashback, it is revealed that young Fate was often bullied due to his constantly rumbling stomach, but he had a close relationship with his father, a skilled warrior famous for his techniques using a teacher. Tragically, his father fell into the hands of monsters, and without his protection, the village chief banished Fate, leaving him to fend for himself. Back in the present, Set begs Fate to help him, but Fate doesn't seem to care because Set is the son of the village chief. He agrees to help only because Gluttony needs to be fed, and the monsters attacking the village would be perfect for him. They arrive at the village, but the village chief is disappointed because Set brought back the once exiled weakling. Set tries to vouch for Fate's strength after having seen him defeat the other warriors, but the chief doesn't believe any of it. The villagers reveal that screams were heard from a nearby forest, thinking the monsters are getting close, and the chief suggests sacrificing Fate to buy them some time. At Set's house, Set tells Fate about his wife being killed by the monsters and that he regrets growing up thinking that his father was always correct, explaining how he finally got his act together when his daughter was born. He informs Fate that the monsters first showed up around a month ago, and according to the eyewitnesses, the monsters can fly. The villagers have never seen anything like it before, so they decided to hire warriors to deal with them. Fate's stomach growled, causing Set to go get him food. Greed informs Fate that the local monsters, especially the gargoyles, begin by probing for attacks to gauge human reactions before unleashing a full swarm. Set's daughter gave Fate a piece of candy, which he ate before suddenly collapsing. Confused, Set and his daughter realized that the candy came from grandfather. His greed made them suspect the candy was poisonous, showing that the village chief intended to sacrifice Fate. Despite Set's efforts, Fate remained unconscious when the gargoyles attacked, setting the village on fire and devouring the villagers. Mixing the antidote revives Fate, and he awakens just in time to witness the destruction. Assessing the situation, Fate checked the stats of the gargoyles and discovered that they possessed the skill of launching fireballs. Greed transforms into a scythe as the gargoyles combine their powers, allowing them to launch a massive fireball. But Fate throws his weapon, slicing through the fireball, and it pursues the gargoyles, wiping them out. The scythe returns to Fate, and he acquires the fireball skill as the leader of the pack appears before him. He checks its stats, and we learn that it has the fireball skill as well as the ability to resist fire. Greed thinks that it will try to launch fireballs at a close range, so as the gargoyle charges at Fate, preparing to attack, he delivers a devastating blow, slicing it in half and killing it instantly. The next day, we learn that the village has been completely destroyed. Fate uses his Identify skill, revealing that the soil isn't healthy, so crops won't grow in that area. Set wonders why Fate chose to be a warrior because he can earn a living with his identity skill, but he tells Set that he has no choice but to fight. Set tells Fate to hit him because he feels guilty for what he did, so Fate tries to punch him lightly, but he gets knocked down as Fate realizes that he has become too strong. He tells Set to look after his daughter, and they bid each other farewell. We see Fate riding a carriage as a man tells him to stay alert because he is being paid to protect the carriage. A band of brigands barred their path, driving the man to desperation as he implored Fate for protection. The ruffians poised for an assault, yet were abruptly scattered when the enigmatic maiden emerged, reminding Fate of his debt for the kobolds. The man permitted her to board the carriage, but as she did, it toppled over. She commanded her weapon sloth to revert to its normal state, remedying the mishap and revealing her ability to alter its weight. Within the carriage, the maiden unveiled her knowledge of Fate's prowess, hinting at a shared nature by confessing her own possession of a deadly sin skill. She introduced herself as Mind of Wrath, and her growling stomach prompted him to offer her food, which she devoured entirely, leaving him with nothing. They soon reached the town of Lanchester, where a girl approached the gate, only to be met by phantoms, causing her to cry out for aid. Rudolph, the Lord of Lanchester, appeared, vanquishing the specters and capturing the girl's attention with his introduction. Fate learns that the expedition led by Roxy will be arriving in the town, and he is about to be paid for his services, but Mind takes it, saying she defeated the bandits. She suddenly falls asleep, so Fate carries her around the town as he notices that everyone has symbols on their necks. Greed thinks that the symbols represent the social classes, thinking the people must really love Rudolph because they allowed him to place symbols on their necks. But we see him executing his men because they have failed in their duty to convey his family's greatness, and we learn that the people are obeying him because they don't want to die by his hands. Fate arrives at a hotel, where Greed reveals that he knows Mind, and that Sloth is also a weapon of mortal sin. He reveals that the skills of deadly sin were born by defying the divine laws, and that Gluttony has the potential to overturn the divine system of leveling because of its ability to consume souls. Fate laments his insatiable hunger, viewing it as retribution for devouring souls. He questions why he was cursed with the skill of Gluttony, revealing his hatred for it as it forces him to perpetually kill to stay alive. Greed cautions him against letting his emotions run wild, warning that a fragile mind could succumb to Gluttony's control. The secret to mastering his hunger, Greed reveals, is to maintain a state of near starvation. During a hunt, Greed advises Fate to gradually satisfy his hunger, rather than indulging all at once. A Sandman appears, and Fate knocks an arrow, enchanting it with a fireball before releasing it, obliterating the Sandman instantly. Elsewhere, Mime awakens and finds something to eat. She learns of a menace called the Sand Golem that threatens the townsfolk, carrying a bounty of 100 gold. Fate continues to hunt Sandman, and he feels the presence of a powerful monster, realizing that it's time for the main dish. We see a group of warriors struggling against the Sand Golem when Fate joins the battle, saying he will take care of the monster. He checks the monster's stats, and we learn that it has the ability to create sandstorms. He launches a fire arrow, and he charges in, but the monster manages to push him back. It uses its skill, creating a sandstorm, but Fate transforms his weapon into a scythe, using it to launch an attack which overpowers the sandstorm, destroying the monster's body. The monster's core tries to escape, hiding in the sand, but Fate uses his bow, launching a powerful arrow, which chases the core, destroying it in an enormous explosion. On the morrow, Fate is bestowed with 100 gold coins for vanquishing the Sand Golem. Yet, as if conjured by the winds of fate, Rudolph emerges, demanding Fate's allegiance. With an air of finality, he decrees that Fate has no choice in the matter. Mime, claiming dominion over Fate, confronts Rudolph, who dismissively calls her a child. Enraged, Mime strikes him with such force that he is sent flying. Sensing the looming peril, Fate urges Mime to flee the town with him. As they journey by carriage, Fate muses about Mime's prodigious appetite. She explains that her anger consumes vast amounts of energy, teasing her about her unchanged stature despite her eating habits. Mime, in her irritation, activates her power, Sloth, inadvertently shattering the carriage. While the owner repairs the damage, Fate explores a nearby village. Greed observes the abundance of monsters, suspecting a guardian presence. In the village, Fate encounters the chief, Aaron, who is revealed to be a holy knight. Recognizing Fate's desire to remain, Aaron issues a challenge to duel him. Fate tries to check his stats, but he recognizes the Identify skill, revealing that he can also use that skill. They exchange blows, and Aaron manages to defeat Fate, but he decides to let him stay, under the condition that they train together. He knows that Fate isn't used to his powers, so he will benefit from their training. He ends up accepting the condition, and Mime appears, grabbing Aaron's attention because he can already tell that she is a skilled warrior. He allows them to stay in the village, and we see him with Fate, training him how to fight hand-to-hand. He struggles to hit Aaron, but he enters half-starvation mode, improving his speed and allowing him to keep up with Aaron's moves. That evening, we see Aaron staring at a nearby castle as Fate sees a photo of Aaron's family. Greed thinks that Aaron's son looks like Fate, thinking his family has something to do with why he became the village chief. At dawn, Aaron instructs Fate to defend himself with naught but a twig. As Aaron charges, Fate predicts the sword's arc, skillfully sliding the twig along the blade to deflect the strike. Aaron, impressed by Fate's improvement, commends him. That evening, Fate informs Aaron of their departure the following day, expressing gratitude for his hospitality. During their meal, Fate notices Mime's relentless eating. She confides that she cannot taste her food, a punishment for her wrath. As Greed elucidates, gazing upon the distant castle, Aaron reveals its history. It was once his home. In his absence, the castle fell to a monstrous siege, and his valiant son Rook perished defending it. The Lich Lord seized the castle, and Aaron's family remained ensnared within. Determined to liberate the castle, Fate decides to venture there, and Aaron joins him. Mime agrees to guard the village in exchange for 50 gold. Upon reaching the castle, Fate uses sandstorm-infused arrows to petrify skeletons. As they delve deeper, they encounter Aaron's family, who appear alive. However, Greed exposes the illusion. They are but phantoms, animated by the Lich's dark magic. Rook suddenly attacks Aaron, but he manages to block it, pushing Rook back. Rook says that he despises Aaron because he abandoned his family to work in the capital, and Rook blames him for what happened to them. Fate thinks about using his scythe to dispel the illusion, but Greed reveals that if they do this, Fate will end up consuming the souls of Aaron's family, sending them to an eternal hell. Aaron says that he will take care of his family, and Fate decides to look for the Lich. He eventually finds it, realizing that its stats are ridiculously high. He manages to break its arms, but it summons a group of zombies who are begging Fate to save them, but he knows that he can't attack them. Aaron joins the fight, taking down the zombies, and he sees his wife, recalling the last moment he spent with his family. We learned that they didn't want him to go, but he promised to return after his mission. He blames himself for what happened to them, because they wouldn't have died if he had returned sooner. But he is determined to put their souls to rest, and he uses the Grand Cross skill, releasing a flash of holy light. But it isn't strong enough to defeat the Lich. Fate beholds Rook's sword and resolves to wield it, merging his powers with Aaron's. Together, they unleash the Grand Cross, a brilliant explosion of light that vanquishes the Lich and liberates the trapped souls. Aaron's family manifests before him, absolving him of guilt for the past, acknowledging his ultimate rescue. With a heavy heart, Aaron seeks their forgiveness, confessing their greater importance over his duties. They encourage him to continue his service to the people, Swearing to honor them, Aaron gives Rook a keepsake, allowing their spirits to find peace. As the souls vanish, the Lich's core attempts one final act of malice. But fate obliterates it, consuming the Lich's essence. That evening, Aaron realizes he has surpassed his level limit, speculating it's due to fighting alongside fate. Greed reveals that Aaron's breakthrough stemmed from opening his heart to fate, who possesses a deadly sin skill. They return to the village, where Aaron compensates Mime for her protection. She explains her need for funds to rebuild her village, cryptically noting that money reveals truths fate will understand with age. Aaron reveals that he saw her 50 years ago, and that she was already a perfect warrior, but her appearance hasn't changed at all. She tells him that he might be able to reach her level after he trains for 1,000 years, but she knows that he won't be able to live that long because he's only human, saying she is a ghost who isn't allowed to die. Aaron observes that Fate's eyes have returned to normal, and he mentions that he needs to keep killing monsters so that his eyes won't turn red. Aaron seems to know about gluttony, telling him to return to the village after his quest, because there is something he needs to know. Meanwhile, the Vlarik family acquires an artifact known as the Philosopher's Stone, which has the power to cure anything, and Raphael's sister thinks that they are closer to achieving immortality. A servant delivers a report, telling them that Hato was killed by Corpse. A servant reveals that Corpse is not a monster, but a warrior, prompting Raphael to seek vengeance for his fallen brother. Fate and Mime continue their journey, with Fate again remarking on Mime's constant eating. She shares some food with him and then naps on his lap. Fate tries to inquire about Mime from Greed, but Greed insists that Fate must discover the truth on his own. Meanwhile, Roxy and her group arrive at Aaron's castle, astonished that the Lich has been defeated. Aaron welcomes them, and Mugen pays his respects. As Roxy is about to introduce herself, Aaron reveals he knew her parents and had named her. When asked about the Lich's defeat, Aaron admits he had help but respects Fate's request to keep his identity a secret. Mugen can tell they are headed for Gallia, so he offers to give Roxy some training as her godfather. Fate and Mind arrive at a ruin, wondering where they are, and Mind reveals this is where she was born. They come across a huge cocoon, and Greed notes that it's a chimera, a weapon which was created in Gallia long ago by patching different monsters together. Fate checks its stats, and we see they are absolutely insane, but Mind thinks they have a chance since it's still an infant. She tells him it's time for him to return the favor, revealing that it can't die as long as its soul is intact, and Fate realizes she wants him to use his gluttoning skill to eat its soul. Mind launches an attack on the cocoon, revealing the chimera, but we see there's a girl at its core. Fate doesn't want to eat her soul, but Mind tells him it's just a monster using human skin. The chimera unleashes a furious assault, conjuring a torrent of molten lava, yet Mind defies the beast, halting its advance. With a swift strike, she severs one of the chimera's arms. Fate follows with his petrifying arrows, but to their dismay, the arrows prove futile as the chimera's arm regenerates. Bewildered, Fate ponders their next move while Mind presses on with her attack. Fate perceives her newfound strength, and Greed observes that the more Mind wields Sloth, the mightier and heavier it becomes, though it grows increasingly unwieldy. Despite their efforts, the creature begins to evolve. Mind urges Fate to retreat, a plea that conjures memories of Roxy, igniting his resolve. Refusing to remain idle, Fate opts for his half-starvation mode. Ignoring Mind's warnings of the danger, he sacrifices 10% of his stats to unleash an enhanced petrification shot. Simultaneously, Mind activates Sloth, striking down the chimera. Yet, the beast erects a barrier, forcing Fate to switch to his scythe, determined to cut through. The barrier pushes him back, but Greed tells him to aim for the flow of mana. He manages to shatter the barrier, and the girl cries in pain. The chimera starts to fly away, and it seems Fate is reaching his limit. Mind tells him to get on her axe, and she launches him up into the sky. Greed tells him he can now use the second stage of his ultimate, at the cost of 20% of his stats, and Fate agrees, upgrading his scythe. But as he gets closer to it, the chimera traps him in its barrier, preparing to burn them both up. But fate delivers the finishing blow, stabbing the girl. But this triggers his telepathy skill. We see the girl's past, and it seems like she knew mind. Fate's gluttony skill activates, but he just feels her loneliness instead of his usual excitement, and greed says it's because she was one of his kin. We see Mind at the girl's grave, and Fate asks her how she knew the girl. Mind reflects on a distant time, acknowledging the harsh truth that she must eliminate anyone who transforms into a chimera, lest they bring further misery to others. The thought strikes a chord with Fate, who fears the same fate might befall him. He solemnly asks Mind to end his life should he lose himself. Embracing him, Mind reluctantly agrees. As Fate prepares to journey to Babylon, Mind focuses on rebuilding her village. She senses he might perish before they reunite. It is revealed that Fate has unlocked Greed's new form, a magical shield. She chastises him for resetting his stats in such a perilous place, and Fate implores her to assist him in hunting to restore his strength. They part ways, with Fate reaching Babylon, the mighty fortress separating the kingdom from Gallia. Seeking the gate, Fate is redirected by Greed, who reveals he once visited the city with his former wielder. Fate asks about them, and we learn they also had a deadly sin skill, but they didn't survive for very long. When they get inside the city, Fate can't believe how expensive things are compared to the capital, but there's suddenly an announcement that the new lord has arrived, and the people are excited to see Roxy. But Fate suddenly notices a strange presence, and it seems they are after Roxy's life. We learn that there are criminals gathering at the city of Babylon because their crimes would be forgiven if they proved their strength. Fate thinks that the soldiers need all the help they can get, so he believes that this is the perfect place for him. We cut to Roxy as she meets the Holy Knight Alistair, who is the officer in charge of Babylon. He reveals he was there when her father was killed, saying he feels guilty for failing to protect him, but she tells him not to worry, saying she is going to help him fight the monsters, and they agree to work together. Meanwhile, Fate notices a scabbard, and Greed urges him to purchase it. Approaching the shopkeeper, Jade, Fate inquires about the item. Jade explains that it's only for display, but offers to craft a custom scabbard for Fate's sword. Upon seeing Greed, Jade is impressed and proposes making the scabbard for 500 gold. Unable to afford it, Fate leaves, grumbling about the high prices in the city. A group of warriors notices him and considers inviting him to join their party, but changes their minds, thinking he appears too weak. During a hunt, Fate senses something in the air. Greed warns him that the spores are toxic and advises against inhaling them. Fate encounters a band of orcs and prepares to fight, but the warriors arrive and begin slaying the beasts. Spotting another group of orcs aiming to encircle the warriors, Fate charges in, even as arrows fly toward him. But he uses Greed's new magic shield form, destroying the arrows, as Greed claims he can withstand any attack in this form. He advises Fate to rush the orcs, so he dashes forward, blocking their attacks as he rams his shield into them, taking them all out in an instant. After the fight, he wonders why his gluttony skill didn't act up, because he usually struggles after consuming plenty of souls, thinking it must be because of his training with Aaron. He goes to the exchange, planning to sell his loot, but the warriors accuse him of stealing, saying the goods belong to them. He tells them to back off, but they continue to pester him, threatening to kill him, so he beats them up. He receives 100 gold for his loot, and at that moment, Roxy enters the room, asking him if he's responsible for the mess. But he declares his actions were in self-defense, and she, burdened with the weight of her inability to uphold order in the city, chooses not to condemn him. Yet, she decrees that the warriors shall spend the night in the dungeon, urging them to reflect upon their deeds. Mia commands Fate to unveil himself, but Roxy intercedes, saying it is unnecessary as she probes his identity. He reveals his name as Corpse, and she, finding his visage peculiar, counsels him to improve his appearance, for he looks disheveled. We observe him roaming the city, relieved that Roxy did not recognize him, though he broods over his disarray, believing he cannot afford the luxury of cleanliness. But at that moment, Jade approaches him, revealing that he has just opened his shop, and he tells Fate that he has an offer for him. He takes Fate to his shop saying he knows what happened in the exchange, so he sees potential in Fate, asking him if he can wear a suit of armor for advertising. He agrees to work with Jade, so he gives Fate a suit of armor, saying he can have it for 80 gold. He is surprised that Jade is charging him for this because he thought that it's free, but after seeing his reaction, Jade agrees to give him a discount. While walking around the city, Fate notices a group of people gathering at a tavern, so he decides to check it out. But he gets a strange feeling as he sees a girl. The girl approaches him, telling him that she's been waiting for him and she already knows who he is, introducing herself as Eris, the sin of lust. They spend time together, and Fate notices a strange sensation whenever he gazes upon her. She explains that this is a side effect of her lust skill, causing people to fall in love whenever they look at her. She confesses that she has been observing him for a long time, aware of his triumph over the Chimera. Yet she warns that more chimeras lurk in Gallia, and she doubts the Holy Knight's strength to vanquish them. Revealing her true intentions, she discloses that she is a guardian of the kingdom, striving for a brighter future. She states that Roxy's demise would benefit the realm, insisting that Roxy must perish in Gallia, but he becomes upset, fearing she plans to kill her. Eris explains the phenomenon of aggression, saying a monster's hatred lingers after it dies, and it accumulates over the years until a crowned beast is born. She tells him that this can also occur for humans, explaining that the people hate the Holy Knights, and Roxy is the only one they love, so her death would accumulate more aggression, and this would give birth to a powerful human who will serve the kingdom in the future. But Fate doesn't want her to die, so he becomes furious and he decides to leave. However, Eris notes that the plan is already in motion, and nothing can stop it. We see Roxy fighting the orcs, and they appear to be winning, but we see Alistair staring at Roxy, and it looks like he's up to something. Alistair reports that they have lost contact with the material gathering squad at the Great Canyon in Gallia. Roxy worries for them, so she immediately orders a rescue mission. Meanwhile, Jade informs Fate about the dust stone required for his scabbard, but mentions he's run out of it. Greed suggests they seek the dust stone themselves, revealing that it can only be found in Gallia. Jade marks their map, and they prepare for the journey. Along the way, they encounter more orcs, but Fate easily dispatches them with his shield. Meanwhile, Roxy's group heads towards the Great Canyon, but struggles with navigation since compasses fail in Gallia. Roxy notes they can estimate their location by the orc concentration, as an orc colony lies near the canyon. The more orcs, the closer they are. That night, Fate rests, but finds himself in a peculiar dream. He sees the girl from the Chimera, who tries to tell him something, yet he cannot discern her words. Everything suddenly turns red, and his fallen foes emerge, dragging him down into the water. He wakes up from the dream, wondering what it meant, but he detects monsters approaching. Using his night vision skill, he sees 4 salamanders closing in. He shoots one of them with his petrification arrows, but notes that they are behaving strangely because they would usually run after receiving such an attack, so Greed thinks they are being controlled. The salamanders arrive at Roxy's camp, and they surround them on all sides. The salamanders breathe fire, causing chaos, but Mia tries to fight back with her magic sword. However, it has no effect, and she is blown away. The salamander prepares to bite them, but Fate arrives just in time. He manages to take out the salamanders, and Roxy thanks him for saving them. Fate points out the strange markings on the salamanders' heads, and the group finds it odd that 4 crowned beasts would work together, seemingly targeting Roxy. They reach the Great Canyon and part ways. As Fate explores, he discovers petrified monsters and spots Eris in the distance, but loses sight of her. Suddenly, he notices a chimera, motionless, and Greed mentions it lacks a core. 2 additional holes in the wall suggest the presence of more chimeras. The ground trembles, followed by an explosion in Roxy's direction, prompting Fate to rush to them. Roxy's group is under attack by the 2 chimeras, with Mujindet injured while protecting Mia. Fate arrives, firing at the chimeras, and Greed observes that their regeneration is slower than the previous chimera they battled. Fate tells Roxy about the chimera's weakness, telling her to aim for their core. They charge in together, and the chimera creates fire around them, but Fate has resistance against it. The chimera tries to protect its core, but Fate cuts its legs, creating an opening, and Roxy delivers the finishing blow. There's one more left, but it suddenly jumps up into the sky. They prepare to attack it as it lands, but it ends up causing the ground to split. Fate and Roxy fall through, but Fate grabs onto Roxy to protect her with his body. When Fate wakes up, he sees how far they fell, and he starts to panic when he notices his mask is gone. Roxy wakes up, but he manages to find his mask. He uses his fire magic to light up the area, and he asks if she managed to find her lost squad, but she tells him she couldn't save them. She asks how he knows so much about the chimeras, and he tells her that a galleon told him about them. Roxy deduces that it was mine, and mentions the rumors that she was traveling with a man wearing a skull mask. Fate admits it was him, and Roxy is pleased she guessed correctly. Fate blushes under her gaze, but she remarks that he reminds her of someone she once knew, hoping that person is happy. Fate calls the person lucky, but then his gluttony stirs, turning one of his eyes red. Not wanting Roxy to see him this way, he runs off, sensing the nearby presence of a chimera. The chimera appears, and he attacks its core with his scythe, thinking about Roxy's expression. He vanquishes the chimera, but notices it bears the same marking as the salamanders, leading Greed to deduce that Roxy is being targeted. Fate suspects Eris's involvement. Roxy catches up to him, and they discover the Duskstone he sought. Back in the city, Roxy challenges Fate to a duel. Mia accuses him of causing trouble, but Fate explains he was merely defending himself as people are hunting him. Roxy tells him that she can't overlook his actions, saying he should join her army because nobody wants to mess with them, but he refuses to join them, so she prepares to fight him, telling him to draw his sword, but he leaves it in the scabbard, so she thinks he's underestimating her. She tells him that she won't hold back, and they start to fight, as he wonders why he can't overpower her, because his stats are supposed to be higher. He realizes that her technique is superior, and she manages to land a hit, leaving a crack on his mask. She threatens to expose him if he doesn't fight seriously, so he unleashes the power of his scabbard. Everyone recognizes it as a holy sword skill, as he explains that the scabbard is made from Duskstone and it improves his holy sword techniques. He charges at her, managing to overpower her, but as he prepares to end the fight, he sees the amulet she's wearing, and he recognizes it, causing him to become distracted. Mugunst disarms him, claiming her hard-won victory, yet she ponders why he let his guard slip. He remains silent, refusing to answer, and she identifies his combat style, inquiring if he was trained by Aaron. She divulges that she encountered Aaron on her travels, who spoke of a powerful wanderer, speculating whether this was a twist of fate. He urges her to remain focused on her quest. He then speaks to Mugen, revealing that the chimera was being controlled and that it used a monster as its core. He elaborates on his family's study of Jellian technology, naming Rain as a brilliant scholar. Fate reveals that chimeras are artificial beings crafted in Dahlia, igniting his desire to meet her. Meanwhile, Rain is in the laboratory, where her colleague mentions Raphael, who is delving into the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone. So she decides to look into it, and we learn that it grants its wielder extraordinary powers, but it completely dominates his body. We return to Fate, as he recalls his conversation with Mind, where she told him about the domain of E, saying he won't be able to defeat the divine dragon until he reaches it. He wonders how he's supposed to reach that level, but at that moment, everyone hears an alarm, as Alistair tells Roxy that the monsters are approaching the city. So she gathers her men, and they charge at the monsters as Fate watches them from a distance, thinking she should be able to win the battle. But he sees a huge monster moving underground, and it's approaching her army, threatening to launch a surprise attack, so he decides to interfere. Greed transforms into a bow, and Fate uses his gluttony skill to strengthen the arrow, allowing him to launch a powerful shot at a distance. The arrow plunges into the earth, striking the beast and forcing it to surface. He leaps at the creature, utilizing his Identify skill to reveal its stats. Realizing its immense power, he knows Roxy is outmatched, The beast conjures an acid rain, and he raises his shield in defense as Greed warns him of corrosion magic, cautioning that contact would be fatal. Resolute, he draws his enchanted bow, losing a mighty arrow that triggers a massive explosion. The creature vanishes, attempting to flee. He discerns that it survived by splitting its body and is now targeting Roxy. Pursuing it, he faces a barrage of smaller replicas. Summoning his Grand Cross skill, he obliterates them in an instant, suspecting the creature is under external control. Diving into the ground, he searches for the monster's core, gathering his energy to unleash his most formidable arrow. The monster appears, and he is about to finish it off, but before his attack could land, he sees bullets hitting the monster. The arrow causes an explosion, and a voice tells him that he has consumed the monster's soul, but it's still alive, so he becomes confused, wondering how it can survive without its soul. He sees a masked man watching him, so fate lunges at him as Greed sees the weapon he's using, recognizing it as the mortal sin, envy. The monster surrounds Fate, as Greed explains that it was hit by a magic bullet, which activated its hidden power, allowing it to create copies of its soul. Fate attacks him, trying to melt his body, but he consumes the monster instead, revealing that he has found a way to counter its corrosion magic. He shoots the man, but a barrier protects him as Greed explains that Fate's stats have reached the limit, saying he will need to reach the domain of E to go any further. But he's still no match for the man, because he is already at that level. Fate charges forward, but the man blocks his assault, pushing him back. The adversary, wielding envy, unleashes magic bullets. Fate raises his shield to block them, yet the force causes him to cough up blood as the man moves in for the kill. Realizing his need for greater strength, Fate pleads with his gluttony skill, vowing to do whatever it takes to surpass his limits. He beseeches Gluttony for the power he needs. Entering the domain of E, he launches a fierce attack, forcing the man to retreat and summon monsters to impede Fate. Undeterred, Fate commands the monsters to stand down, sprinting past them. He continues his pursuit, evading magic bullets and creating a smokescreen to obscure his target's vision. Fate reappears behind the man, shattering his mask and unveiling his identity as Alistair. Unfazed by this setback, Alistair plays a flute, summoning the divine dragon. The dragon heads towards Roxy, prompting Fate to rush to her aid while Alistair attempts to block his path. Meanwhile, we see Roxy's army fighting the monsters as the divine dragon appears. Mugen orders everyone to retreat as it approaches Roxy, firing a powerful energy beam which blows everyone away. But Fate protects her with his shield, and the force of the attack causes his mask to break as he realizes that he can no longer hide his secret. Roxy is surprised to see him, and she is shocked as she looks at his eyes. He apologizes for lying to her, but tells her to retreat while he buys time. He goes to confront the dragon, using his Grand Cross skill, and he manages to hold it in a prison. Alistair shoots at him, and the two start fighting once again, but Fate seems to struggle. Alistair notes that he's using too much power maintaining his skill, so he doesn't stand a chance. Fate fails to land a hit, and Alistair cuts off his arm. Alistair readies the final blow, but suddenly he is stabbed from behind. Fate, having used illusion magic, cuts Alistair down. As Gluttony activates, Fate is enveloped in a blinding white, where he encounters the girl from Mind's memory again. She introduces herself as Luna, thanking him for killing her, but apologizing as the floor beneath them cracks. She reveals she can no longer hold back his gluttony, warning him that devouring the divine dragon will cause him to lose himself. The floor collapses, but Greed catches Fate, urging him to leave. Grateful for Luna's warning, Fate steels himself to defeat the dragon. They emerge outside, but the dragon breaks free from Fate's skill. Despite Greed's concern about his missing arm, Fate hurls himself at the dragon, delivering a powerful punch and cutting it apart. As the dragon retaliates with an energy blast, Fate boosts his stats using Overload, slicing through the blast and cleaving the dragon in two. The dragon falls through the ground, and Fate's gluttony devours the soul. He feels an intense pain, and he's about to go berserk, but he sacrifices all his stats to unlock Greed's final form to prevent himself from causing damage. Mine appears, noting that he has let his skill consume him, and Fate asks her to finish him off. She prepares to keep their promise, but Roxy suddenly saves him. He tells her not to look at him, but she cries for him, saying she doesn't care what kind of power he has, and that she likes him for who he is, telling him not to die. He strangely feels his gluttony calming down, and Roxy tells him to go back with her. He's relieved. She accepts him after learning the truth, and he collapses in her lap. When Fate awoke, he found himself within the city's familiar bounds once more. Eris and Mine soon visited, informing him that he had slumbered for an entire week. Eris returned greed to him, prompting Fate to remark on its grime. Mine explained that she had been preoccupied with envy, revealing its mind control abilities, and that Alistair had fallen under its sway. Fate, curious about envy's fate since it was indestructible, learned from Mine that she had simply discarded it. Eris noted the failure of the crowned human experiment with Roxy and mentioned that they would need Fate's assistance in the future. Fate agreed, on the condition that Roxy would be left unharmed. Eris urged they depart before Roxy's return, warning that even her name stirred dangerous gluttony within Fate. Roxy arrived to find Fate already gone, discovering a note in which he explained his abilities and vowed to return. She reminisced about the courage she always drew from him, recalling their first meeting. At first, Fate feared her, thinking that all holy knights were bullies, and she realized how people viewed them. He was embarrassed and apologized, but his stomach growled, so she ended up giving him the food. He was happy that he was able to meet a good paladin and that she could be proud of herself. She wonders when they will meet again, and she promises to be stronger so she can protect him. We see Fate use Greed's new staff form, and he is able to regenerate his arm. Eris and Mine go their separate ways, and Fate sets out with Greed to find a way to control his gluttony. Today's movie is here. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.